Hi, everyone. My name is Whit Taylor, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the 2024 Book Festival's virtual festival day for a conversation with Bianca Xunise, Walter Greason, Nate Powell, and Tim Fielder. Um, so to begin, I want to let you know that the books are going to be available from the link below, so you can purchase books that way. And I'm going to start introducing you to all of our lovely guests today. So let me just get this screen up. All right, one sec. All right. So we have Tim Fielder. Tim Fielder is an illustrator, concept designer, cartoonist, and animator, born in Tupelo, Mississippi, and raised in Clarksdale, Mississippi. He has a lifelong love of visual Afrofuturism, pulp entertainment, and action films. He holds other Afrofuturists such as Samuel R. Delany, Octavia Butler, Pedro Bell, and Overton Lloyd as major influences. He is the creator of the graphic novels Infinitum, an Afrofuturist tale published by HarperCollins Amistad in 2021, the Glyph Award-winning Maddie's Rocket, and the graphic history of hip hop. Fielder is also known for participating in the Carnegie Hall Afrofuturism Festival exhibit, Black Metropolis, and the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History Culture exhibit, Afrofuturism, A History of Black Futures. We have Walter Greason, PhD, is the Wallace Professor of History at Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota. He is an author, editor, and contributor to 21 books and hundreds of academic essays. His pioneering scholarship has generated multiple new areas of inquiry, including suburban studies, Afrofuturism, and stratification economics. Next, we have Nate Powell. Nate Powell is a National Book Award winning cartoonist who began self publishing comics as an Arkansas teenager in 1992. His work includes the new graphic novel Fall Through and a comics adaptation of James Loewen's Lies My Teacher Told Me, as well as Save It for Later, civil rights icon John Lewis's March Trilogy, and many more. Powell has published nonfiction comics and writing for the Washington Post, the Nib, Popula, LitHub, Booklist, CNN, and the Weather Channel. He lives in Bloomington, Indiana. And we have Bianca Xunise. Bianca is an illustrator, writer, and educator from Chicago, Illinois. With 2 Ignatz Awards under their belt, Bianca enjoys being a voice for those who march to the beat of their own drum and hopes that their comics are comforting to those who feel like they don't fit in. In 2020, Bianca became the first nationally syndicated non-binary cartoonist and second Black woman when they joined the comic strip Six Chicks as their first Black creator. Eunice has also collaborated with Vogue, the Washington Post, the Nib, and Believer magazine. When Bianca isn't doodling away, they usually are at an underground DIY punk show dancing with friends by the Chicago Riverside. In April, their 2024, their graphic novel Punk Rock Karaoke from Penguin Teen debuted with rave reviews. Critics are already calling it a, quote, gripping narrative, relatable situations, and evocative artwork with an aesthetic that oozes with late 70s zine flair. Publishers Weekly starred review. So I would like to welcome all of our lovely contributors, and let's get started. Um, all right. So feel free, everyone, to just jump in, like whatever feels right to you. We don't have to go in any particular order. But I was hoping to hear from all of you about your involvement in your respective scenes that are featured in the book. So for Nate and Bianca, the local punk scenes that you've been involved in, and then for Walter and Tim to maybe talk a little bit about your involvement with hip hop.
So for me, hip hop shaped my whole life. And from the moment I was born, it was the week after Cool Herc's party. And so by the time it hit 1978, like Sugar Hill Gang was on regular rotation. Curtis Blow was like Daily Connection. This was everything my life was built about. And it was hard because my parents were much more into gospel and into kind of like what is it, Anne Murray, kind of soft country. And so they were not feeling these guys rhyming and speaking over break beats. But it was just too good. It was too good. By the time we got to Run DMC, the way you see in the actual novel, it took over. It took over. People couldn't deny the power of hip hop. And so I was very fortunate to build my life around the study of hip hop. I've been teaching courses about hip hop since 1994. And that's the foundation of who I am. Like even at my lowest moments, I will go back and find songs and lyrics that like just bring me new energy and keep me in perspective. So yeah, like if I'm made of any sound, it is definitely classic hip hop music up through like 2005, 2006.
Okay. How about you, Tim?
Oh, well, I am a square. I'm a square. I listen to hip hop, but I am in my core a black rock guy. I grew up, well, not just grew up, I was in the black punk, black funk punk scene, alternative jazz scene in New York City in the, the mid to late 80s. CBGBs, I went there on a regular basis. So I was one of those idiot kids that, if you can imagine me with a whole head of hair shaved on the back and the sides, wearing all black, couldn't afford leather boots, so it had to be Pro-Cats, that type of thing, black. And so Fishbone, Living Color, the latter Bad Brains, that's what I was into. But as a working cartoonist who kind of worked in the alternative editorial cartooning scene for publications like The Village Voice, and I was a member, or at least early member of the Black Rock Coalition, I was doing that type of work around this alternative music scene. Plus, I was seriously listening to people like Cecil Taylor, James Baldwin, Ronald Shannon Jackson. So yes, I was insane. But professionally, it was required for me to do images of hip hop players. So I would do early illustrations of people like Queen Latifah, Public Enemy. I was just showing a few minutes ago an image I did with Mike Gonzalez, who's a pretty prominent hip hop writer. I did this illustration for him back in 1988. So yes, I am old, and I am Afro punk. I am also hip hop, and this guy lost his mind and brought me on board to do this book. So I guess everything's full circle now.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to talk about how you two linked up and like how that collaboration went, and I will definitely get back to that. But I had no clue you were into punk too. That's cool. Um, yeah. Bianca, Nate, either of you want to jump in?
Sure, I'll go in. So I'm from Little Rock, Arkansas, and basically in the early '90s, transitioning as like a young comic book nerd, metalhead. My town of Little Rock just happened to have a very thriving youth-centered underground that was also weird because it was Arkansas, and so in terms of being able to like process any kind of cultural input, um, there just wasn't a lot of frame of reference for stuff. And there weren't like the only way a scene would really work is if everyone from all of their weird corners and weird dungeons all figured out a way to make it work together. So throughout the late 80s, 90s, 2000s, one thing that made the Little Rock Underground thrive, one thing that made what I will call punk thrive was the fact that it was this weird crossover that constantly had elements from the local metal scene, the hip hop scene, the art scene, and a lot of it took advantage of what was at the time sort of ignored around town, public unused spaces. So shows, especially because the South and it was warmer, a lot of shows were always outdoors. They were free, they were public, and they were illegal. And so there's a strong sort of like social and community focused component to the what we were building, but also the sounds that were coming out of that community. Like my own band, Sufi Nun Squad, started in '92. The same month I started self-publishing comics. And I wasn't really aware of comics that weren't superhero adjacent at the time. So there were other young cartoonists and zine makers who were also teenage kids in my scene. And it was sort of mind-blowing to see people putting their energies into self-publishing print matter that I had never seen before, being outside of a superhero context. Sukanen Squad was also this sort of genre-defying, conceptual like punk entity that was kind of like a mix of like Public Enemy, the Big Boys, and the Muppet Show. And a lot of these things are just balled together into this weirdness that was hard to pin down at the time. So as we joined the world and started touring in 97 onward, a lot of that had to do with encountering, other kids, other scenes, and seeing what seemed like a parallel universe, discovering that more established scenes and communities within punk often were more conservative, both musically and socially and politically, because they had more of a structure that told them, oh, this is what works, this is what doesn't, this is how things are. And it was our weirdness that really allowed us to thrive and find who we were.
Awesome. And I feel like that definitely comes across in the book. So I look forward to talking more about that. How about you, Bianca?
Okay. Like this, I'm like, tell me more. Like I'm so like locked into everybody's backstory. Let's see. I say I kind of feel like I could relate to both Walter and Tim's upbringing. Like I definitely like Black weird kid. No one had to show me. Like I have this short story called Diary of a Pink Wig, about this pink wig that I found at Joanne Fabrics during Halloween time. It was like a costume wig. And because my mom wouldn't let me dye my hair at the time, because my mom was super conservative. She raised us like super Christian and things like that. And one of the reasons why I found this genre of music that's almost kind of before my time is because she kind of considered everything that was current pop music to be like the devil's music, but anything that was from the past was cool. So that was like my loophole. So I was able to find like 1977 punk and new wave and goth music because I would just find records at the thrift store or just listening to it like on the oldie station. And she was like, well, I don't know, they're just singing about love, I guess. I don't know. And it was just like all good to go. Double back into that other story, like I bought this wig and I would wear it to school and I would get bullied. And I grew up on the South Side of Chicago. Like I grew up around like all Black teens. A lot of times people are like, oh, you must behave this way because you grew up around white people, you want to be white. And I'm like, no, I'm just weird. Like this is just authentically who I am. This is just what I'm drawn to. I think Black people are not a monolith and we're allowed to exist in different ways. And also like Black people invented rock and roll. So I actually feel super close and in touch with my Blackness by being into this genre of music that, you can watch a video of, Johnny Rotten. And like, if you like really pay attention, you can see that he's like doing his best impersonation of like Chuck Berry. That's why he moves like that. Like, it's not just like some weird kid moving. It's just because the weird kids were offbeat and they were trying to do impersonations of Little Richard and James Brown. And it looked like this weird dance, but they were just like, they were exposed to Black music. And it's just a constant conversation around that. But that's sort of like what I talk about in my book, Punk Rock Karaoke, the segue into that. And it's about being a weird Black kid, being, on the South Side of Chicago and finding your voice through this genre of music and using it as a tool of community. Like, I really like what you were saying, Nate, about sort of traveling around. I recently toured with my friend's band because I wanted to like get like more of like a hands-on experience. And so I was like, just put me to work. Like I'll be a roadie. I got a little cut. And what is it? Seeing all these different scenes all across America. Yeah, it was like you would see these weird parallels. And then, but depending on like where you were in the country, you could see like it's almost like the scenes that are in more populated areas, like a big city, that's where there's like, it's more rigid. It has to be this way versus like in the small towns, like a kid will be like, I'm punk, but they're like dressed like Pikachu. Like it's just, it's their own version of it. There's no rules to it. It's just, I feel like the middle of nowhere makes the best weird kids. And I'm so excited for them to read my book.
I mean, I think that like the sense of place plays such a big role in all of your books. Like you said, I feel like you make the South Side of Chicago come alive in that. Like I know you have a lot of like hometown pride, which I think comes through in like your work in general, which is awesome. And you know, Nate, you too, just like capturing the essence of like being in the middle of nowhere, this small town, and like making your culture and your community there. Also with the Walter and Tim, I noticed too how you break up your book in terms of different areas of the United States in terms of different different hip hop scenes. So I think it starts with the East. So I was wondering, like, can you talk a little bit about the world building in your respective books, and like, kind of what are some of the things that you kind of thought about when you were designing these worlds that we inhabit when we read your books?
Yeah, you start, man.
All right. So this was initially designed by the New York City Public Schools as a contract. And so that was the jump off. They wanted something that talked about hip hop in New York City specifically and gave them a sense of the different kinds of places around the city that shaped the way hip hop emerged. And so as a historian, you know, okay, they give me a frame to work with. But I'll be very frank. I love your question about place because I'm primarily an urban historian. And to ground hip hop in these specific communities, most folks haven't done. Like they'll kind of talk about the community in the background, but won't really deal with the way the place influences the people, and then the people transform the place. And so that's a core piece of the dynamic across all of all the different pages in the book. The East page right there, we're very intentional about having the Twin Towers there and situating it in the past and giving people a different sense of the world, but also emotionally making it resonate in a different way. And so you get the Last Poets at the front, you get Gil Scott-Heron in the back, and like you're immediately transported to the mid 1970s, even the late 1960s, to kind of see what the experience of the city was like. And so we try to do that on so many different parts of the book. I think the most subtle thing that no one's really caught in any of the presentations we've done is we're looking at different places around the country, whether it's Chicago or Atlanta or the Bay Area. But then there's a transition to cities around the world and the way that hip hop goes global. And so that's one of the pieces I wish we would get the chance to talk about more, is whether you go to Cape Town or you go to Ecuador or you go to Hong Kong or Dubai, they're all different hip hop scenes everywhere in the 21st century. And that's really the basis of why we're doing volume 2, is to give a sense of how much more hip hop as a global culture and industry has evolved.
And will that be starting from like the present time, or where are you starting with this next volume?
So yeah, it goes 2006 to 2023.
Cool, very cool, awesome.
Yeah, it's it's just an interesting thing to decide. I'll tell very quickly the story of how the format of the book, because initially the floppy was just 24 pages, right? But thanks to this guy working it out, we own the IP. So we figured, oh well, we'll just add a few more pages. Sure, maybe 5-10 pages, that'll be fine. And then they released it for free, the 24-page online, and our business partner was like, oh my God, they're giving away the farm. They're giving away the farm. So I was like, oh, we can't give away the farm. So that I asked Walter, I was like, well, Walter, could you give us a timeline? Figuring that he would do, the 70s, group it up together. He comes back with 42 years worth of timeline over the history of hip hop. And I'm like, well, first of all, we're not going to give this away. So that took the book from 24 pages to 92 pages. And I was in the hospital in December as a result of it, with wires stuck in me, but we got through it. And we finished it. And I think I'm so proud of the fact that we showed the world, and there's more to show. But I want to take one moment, Bianca, God bless you. See, that's nice. It's so nice to know that those who are like, I'm 58, right? Thank you. Thank you. It lets me know that being weird, it wasn't for naught. I mean, we still here. Thank you for that. Anyway, I had to say that. Sorry, apologies.
No, I think that's great. I also identify as a Black weirdo, so I appreciate this.
You know what I mean?
I appreciate this community. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. Nate, did you or Bianca, did you want to chime in about any of this about place and like your world building experience, and what are some of the things you thought about when you were designing and doing layouts and all of that for your comics?
Bianca, you want to jump in since Tim passed the torch to you?
Sure, I can jump in. Let's see what we got here. Okay, perfect. Yeah. So, what you kind of mentioned before, just like bringing like the South Side alive, and I wanted to show it truthfully. I didn't want to sort of like over romanticize. Well, no, I romanticized it, but I didn't want to show it in a way that shamed it, that made it feel like, oh, you should be ashamed you're from here. You should be like, oh, how could they live in such squalor and despair? Like, growing up as a poor Black kid, like it probably didn't even hit me till I got older that like my situation financially, like it was just kind of like we were just living our lives. It was like we had to sort of leave the South Side for people to kind of like point and look at you and be like, oh my God, look at this. But it's like we were joyful. We were, finding ways to explore our imagination and to find these moments. And so when I was creating this world, this scene here, like we have the two main characters, Ariel and Michelle, just like walking through their neighborhood. And yeah, I like wanted to like keep it real. Like there's like a sign that says like EBT accepted here, but it's at a liquor store, like it's, there's the bank that's closed. There's a quinceañera store, like there's rats running around, but they're just like popping up, they're just like bopping around, just happy as can be, because it was real. Like there's still joy in that. And I wanted people to look at like where I come from and look at Chicago in a different way than it's always kind of portrayed as like this violent city where just like oh no, there's Black teenagers outside. Like that's sort of like, oh God, no, not the Black teens. They were just being silly. Like even like a lot of times, like even those, not to go over here, but in those videos where they show like Black teens in the parks in Chicago, like they're dancing. Like they're dancing. They're just dancing in the street because we're just bored. I don't know.
The joy comes across. It's like
joy comes
palpable.
across.
It does, yeah.
And like even here, like that's an actual like what my house looked like growing up. Like, that's like, an example, like, single mom, like, raising us and taking care of us, and scriptures on the wall and things like that, and just holding us, despite our upbringing. Because like, my mom always wanted to protect us as well. And that came through. And it just, again, just wanted to just like I always say, like when people read this book, I wanted them to kind of just feel like, some weird kid just walking around, and you see these really like cool punk kids, and they like grab your hand and they're just like, do you want to come with us? Do you want to just like have the best night of your life? And they just bring you into this world. And I hope that that's what comes across when you read my book.
Yes, thank you.
I'd say as far as working through the building of a world and unpacking my baggage and fall through, I guess right off the bat, the fact that this is a book that takes place in 1994, a year in which I would have been 16, but following what would have been maybe two punk generations older than me, like a bunch of 22-year-olds. Primarily, this book is an interdimensional soap opera. There's like bootleg magic. There's like wormholes and bubble universes. It's melodramatic to the point of basically being like X-Men without the superpowers. And so when I was making this distinctly as a period piece, because I was also, unpacking my own baggage, the ways in which I was shaped by punk as a community, but also the kinds of expectations I put on the world around me and on relationships. I very much wanted to avoid even giving the feeling of my delivery as being nostalgic. I knew that was kind of unavoidable because there's so much love and like, as Bianca was talking about earlier, like, of course there's like a romantic depiction of some of this, and like it's good to point that out because like you can't avoid it all. That really does show where the love comes from. But when sort of establishing this world of 1994 anti-corporate, deep underground, hardcore punk, A lot of it, like there are certain signifiers, obviously, like no internet and using these weird illegal tone dialers to figure out where you're going on payphones, etc. But a lot of it is imagining community as a mappable network, but something that's being mapped out by young adults as they go through systems of word of mouth, etc. And the ways in which like I don't know, it follows how any type of creative community sort of clears out a free space when it's in a moment of transition where there's room for new voices and new perspectives. But when something is changing like that, like what was happening within underground punk in 93 and 94, as it's happening, often it's kind of undefinable. And that's what makes it so special, fragile, and powerful. It's what allows it to spread so quickly, is this enthusiasm for the fact that something is happening, but nobody can exactly put their finger on what it is. And there's that dynamic tension between the undefinable magic of it and the ability for the people within that community to talk about it and relate to it and contribute to it, which ultimately means you're like flattening, simplifying, and mythologizing what's happening as it's happening. And so that's sort of the major tension, but it's also the story of punk at the time, like continually forcing itself to be less and less accessible, less and less inviting, out of fear for having this special, fragile thing defined and thus taken away.
Yeah, makes sense. So one thing that I think that's interesting, like too, and you brought this up, like you just said this, like how you kind of framed your story, or like the genre you chose was this it's like there's sci-fi in it, there's magical realism, which is not something I expected at first. Like I didn't know what to expect, but I thought that was such an interesting choice. And it just makes me like, I want to ask like all of you, like how come you chose the genres that you did, or the formats that you did? Because Bianca too, like yours is like kind of, it's a fun read. It reminds me of like 80s movies, and I know you love 80s movies and like 80 a lot of 80s pop culture and stuff like that. And then for Walter and Tim, yours is it's kind of like an encyclopedia, like a timeline. And so I'm curious as to why you took the approaches that you did for your stories.
I guess I can do mine really quickly. In a nutshell, I enjoy the concept of magical realism simply by the limitation that we're dealing with the world that we all recognize, except there is an inexplicable uh, paranormal or magical component that changes our understanding of that entire world, yet it's not required to explain exactly how that works. I love the sort of leap of faith it requires of the reader or the viewer to simply accept that this part operates on a completely different level than the world that we understand. And so, like, as a writer, I've enjoyed from my 2018 book, Come Again, to this book, Fall Through, and to the next book, sort of reverse engineering plot elements to get where I need to draw what I want to draw. And like so much of writing is problem solving, but for example, with Fall Through, a lot of it hinges on an insurmountable time paradox that happens with the main character in an early flashback that sort of establishes who she is and where she's coming from. And the fact that she doesn't understand how she has wound up in the book's present moment at the time. And in order to make the time paradox function in the book, I sort of had to go backwards from there and be like, okay, so what could possibly allow this to exist that will be acceptable in a narrative sense? And you're like, okay. And coming up with that reason, you're like, now we have a new set of options. What could be behind this door? What could be behind this door? For me, it's really fun to use that problem-solving component of writing and sort of allow options to present themselves as the story is being created in real time.
Right. How about you, Bianca?
I just want to say I love that. Like I think that's really cool, Nate. And I think that it's it's becoming something I feel like I've noticed a lot in the way that we present fiction of like trying so hard to make things grounded, then be like, y'all, it's fiction. Like, let's have some fun. Like let's use our imaginations. Let's go. Let's explore. Not to go on like on a total big tangent here, but I was watching the new Penguin show for Batman, and I was like, you know what? I just want my Tim Burton goth Batman. Like, just can he just be spooky and there be clowns and stuff? I don't need like a gritty crime drama. I just want my Tim Burton stripes, like please. But I feel like I'm not fully understanding what's the prompt? What's the question? What?
Oh, okay. So I was just asking, like, why did you pick the genres or formats that you did for your books? So,
Oh,
like,
sure.
yeah.
Um, I I always like heard that like phrase, right? Like write what you know. And because this was my first book, I wanted to do something that felt like a culmination of everything that I've written before, which has all been sort of autobiographical. Like I was talking about the Pink Wig story. I also did like a sort of like a gag and a chick track called The Doubles Music and things like that, and bringing it all together, but not necessarily in such like a critical sense, but um in like a loving way. And I'm still building my story. I'm still building the longer autobiographical thing that I'll probably write one day in the future. I feel quite young, and I feel like I need more life experiences before I write this confessional, Prozac Nation story. But I wanted to sort of like what's the word, it's kind of like autobiographical fiction, like everything that punk rock karaoke, like the experiences of punk rock karaoke, um I either like witnessed or experienced myself. Everybody asks me like, are you Ariel? And like there's definitely like a lot of Ariel in me. Honestly, I think the character that I probably was the most in high school in the book is Fatima, which is this one character that's kind of a nerd, that's sort of like, you just see her running in the background and she's like
The
taking pictures of
fangirl.
all the punks and she's making zines about it, but she's like not invited. She's just like super like admiring and just like a geek. And like that's still me today. Like I mentioned before, like, me asking my friends, like, can I go on tour with you guys? And I was telling like, can I have my Cameron Crowe experience of going on tour with a band and writing about it? And they're like, yeah, Bianca, like you're cool. Like I've always been a lover of this. Like I'm such a fan of music and I'm such a fan of underground counterculture. And I find it to be such a important and pure art form, especially coming from this country. When I was traveling and living in Berlin last year, there was kind of like this, almost like this idea of like, what is like American culture? Like, what is like Black culture? Like we can see like the clear cultures of like, people who are from like Jamaican culture or Haitian culture or culture from different countries in Africa. But like what do Black Americans offer? And I'm like the culture of the world, baby. Like we did a lot. We did a lot. Like everybody's mimicking it in some way. And again, like I said before, like this just it's a love letter to just the world that I admire so much and I feel is often misunderstood. Like this is, I feel like this is like me bringing its day in court and just
Signal break.
giving it
Yeah,
a
our
moment to
signal broke
shine.
because everybody else froze. Let's see. Hopefully,
Oh.
take out the video.
Tim, Walter, you all right? It's like might be something. Can you hear everybody and see everybody now? Good? All right, awesome. Yeah, let's keep going. Do you mind if I jump to another question?
Yeah, let's
Or
go
do you
for it.
want, or Tim, Walter, do you, okay, cool. So I want to talk a little bit about lyricism in terms of and process. So the thing that's like I think I find very exciting about all of your books is how you work in lyrics and music into your works. Um, both in terms and how that affects the visuals. Like I've been thinking about, like for instance, the scenes in let me just get back to where are we? Like these really just like dynamic images from Fall Through of all of these house shows and stuff like that. And the lyrics that kind of weave throughout the story. Same with Bianca. I actually don't have an image from that, but I'm thinking about towards the end of your book, when they're singing their, I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's just like there's so much, you play so well with the visuals in terms of um, just really making the music come alive. And I think that can be hard to translate music into book form. So I guess I'm wondering, like, what were some of the considerations you took when you were designing page layouts, when you're thinking about flow and pacing and all of that, add in color? I know this is like covering all visuals, but like, what were some of the things you specifically um tried to put attention to when you're trying to capture the musicality of your stories,
Uh,
if that makes any sense?
Yes, total sense. For Fall Through and for my comics in general, this is where I have always felt that comics, like this puts it on easy mode, where like comics as a medium have an inherent musicality to them. And a lot of that, I think, has to do simply with the structure of panel flow and page flow. And so I often lean into the fact that I'm using, at least in my head, I'm using musical terminology and stuff, and like a lot of the rhythm that's happening from top left to bottom right, happening with the, breaks and gutters between panels, and the ways in which I kind of like stack captions and stack panels on top of each other, the rhythm by which I end, an idea, end a note, all of that I feel like is always paying a nod to my relationship to music. And like my process of making music had nothing to do with making comics, because it was such a communal effort, and it wasn't me just holed up in my room by myself doing my thing. But on a sensory level, I feel like that's where the fun and where the challenge is. It's like you can always see examples. I feel like, to speak for myself, I can think of examples sometimes in which I see where music doesn't really embody what makes music powerful when you see it on a comics page. And so for me, a lot of it is like I do all my lettering by hand directly on the paper. And there are practical reasons for that. Also, I'm just old enough that like I barely know how to use Photoshop to assemble my scans and stuff. But I lean into that limitation, and I feel like pushing hand lettering as far as I can go to integrate it into the image, particularly when music comes to the forefront, really helps carry that transcendent like power of music. And I think Liz Suburbia's 2016 book Sacred Heart, which Fantagraphics released, was a really good example of it's also a weird, cryptic, kind of creepy punk in a very tiny community, with like darkness at the fringes kind of story. But whenever music comes into a scene, she begins to activate just through her line work, without using, as far as I remember, even musical notes, without using many lyrics, entirely using line work and form to give a sense of energy emanating instead of music. And I was really drawn to that. We're like, you're being blasted by energy, blasted by ideas. It's not really about the notes that are being played. So I tried to kind of keep that in mind as I was trying to figure out the most effective way to communicate the power of music.
I mean, comes through. I mean, it was just one of those books I just like couldn't put down because there was just so much. It was so energetic, and I felt like I was there, like through many parts of it. So I think you pulled that off quite successfully. Yeah.
Thank you.
How about you? Yeah. Yes, please, Walter.
A little bit that it's hitting me as we're in the conversation together. There are layers of surreality, certainly in what we're doing in graphic history, but I think across all the books we're seeing today, in that at one level, these are two-dimensional visuals representing three-dimensional spaces and experiences. But then when we get into the mechanics of it, we were just talking about one of the Stevie Wonder lyrics that appears in Graphic History of Hip Hop. And it works to invoke Stevie's song and to give people, I think, the structural component where people see the lyrics on our pages before they see the rest of the content, and it gives them a tone of how to experience that page in that time. But then beyond that, there's this level of metatextual criticism where we're putting forward on that page a critique of Reaganomics, of the way deregulation absolutely decimates working class communities across the United States. And to link Reaganomics as a form of superstition is a vital piece of knowledge going forward in the 21st century. But to do it subtly in a way that a high schooler or a middle schooler can just start to ask the question, okay, why is this linked together? These things were very important with us. And I see it in Bianca's work. I see it in Nate's work. The way there's a subtlety in the way that the images are read, that the text is read, that the piece about pacing and how people experience going through a graphic narrative, these things are tremendously important because we live in this mediated reality where we're skimming TikToks or doom scrolling, and we have a very different sense of pace and being overwhelmed by the information and the energy that we encounter. And these texts allow us to see kind of a different world and experience a different way that we live and absorb that energy and information. And so for me, like, it's a tremendous gift I get from Tim to kind of bring his sensitivity about that and the way the human experience evolves across time, across page, but it also is centered in a particular moment in each case. And so I do agree. It's the way that this graphic art is constructed that lets it have a musicality that lets us blend what looks real, but in fact is a surreal experience for anyone who encounters it.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, all three of your books really like unabashedly address politics, religion, identity, all of these things so seamlessly. And I don't think you can really separate those things from the music, especially the scenes that you all are involved in. In terms of your book, Walter and Tim, how did you go about choosing the lyrics that you did? And how did you choose, like, what was your collaboration process like in terms of that?
Yeah, so Tim did a real solid to me off the jump. He laid out how scripting works in terms of panel format and how to kind of give guidance. But at the same time, as I layered it and started with particular lyrics for particular moments, and then talk about how to kind of potentially illustrate it or lead to the history that can be shared out of the things that scholars write, he would come back and be like, well, what about this? I think one of my favorite moments was incorporating Parliament Funkadelic into like the early kind of evolution of what hip hop does. And so as he drew and sketched, this was then speaking back to the text, and it gave me the opportunity to clarify, to amplify, to deepen the actual words. And that builds on a theory I've been teaching for a long time about the way that words, images, and sounds intersect. And so that became the core exercise. I want to say it took us like 8 or 9 months to go back and forth between all the different layers of content and really make it work so it could work at multiple grade levels.
Gotcha. Yeah, just super, super well done. I appreciate you bringing up P-Funk because I feel like we don't talk about that enough, their influence on hip hop. So we're running towards the end. So I want to make sure that we have enough time for audience questions. So I'll be if folks who are listening, if you have anything that you want to ask our wonderful creators, now is the time to do it. I will get them in the chat, and I will be picking some out. Man, there's so many things I want to ask you all right now, and as I wait for questions, let me just see if I have anything else I want to just ask before that. How's the reception been for your respective books? If you can maybe mention any particularly heartening conversations or things that have come out of sharing your work with your readers?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Yeah, I did Infinitum, I did Maddie's Rocket, and they were good. They were good. The most important thing for me out of Infinitum and Maddie's Rocket is that my work became part of the Afrofuturist canon. And after, decades of being in that field with hearing the orchestra of crickets, it was a relief, right? However, with this particular book, I have never done this much media in my life. I have never been on TV as much in my life. I need to lose a little weight because it doesn't look as good on the screen. I recognize that I need to. There's so many different things. It's been a ride. I mean, we're literally across the street from the UN right now because we're involved with the UN Summit of the Future, our book. So yeah, it's a different thing when you begin. I mean, we've presented at the Metropolitan Museum of the Arts, Smithsonian. We were at San Diego. It was good to see you there, Nate. And what is the other one we did? We said we did the Met, we did the Smithsonian, did something else that was pretty cool.
Oh, you're talking about Schaumburg, where we
Yeah. So it's like we've been everywhere. We've been all over the country. I can talk a lot, as y'all well know, but I've never had this kind of reception to anything I've ever done in my life. And it is
No, you're forgetting about the kids and the fact that we just got chased out of a room.
Oh yeah, that's even if we were in a salon like 30 minutes ago. Well, just before this, and it was like 90 people there, but in this apartment. And part of it is great, part of it is absolutely exhausting, but hey, it's a good job. You can get it. I'll take it after decades. Absolutely.
All right. I appreciate that.
I'll jump in onto this. I will say that the reception has been incredible. What is it? Like in the old way that this word used to be like understood, like awesome, because like I'm constantly in a state of awe of like the response. Like I started writing and drawing comics. I've been doing this since I was a kid, and I always joke that you mentioned like John Hughes movies and things. Like I always joke that I was Kevin from Home Alone growing up because I was the youngest, and I was like the kid that were like that we forgot one at the grocery store and we had to like go back and get them, and like that was me. And so like drawing and writing was like my way of like having a voice. And now I'm like, oh whoa, everybody's listening now, and I'm like, whoa, I'm not used to this. Not used to people like paying attention. And it's been a beautiful experience, like the way Chicago, Chicago is obsessed with itself, and they've like come out and accepted it with open arms. I can barely go to the store now without people being like, "Are you Bianca Xunise?" And I'm like, I gotta make sure I look put together now. Just trying to run the wall. And but also like I had a really incredible experience at goodness gracious, why can't I remember the name of this place? And I had my book party in New York at Blue Stockings, and they like helped pull that together, and they had bands perform. And there was this one band called Speak Easy. Like I had never heard of them before, and they performed, and they literally looked exactly like the kids in the book, and I was kind of like, what? Like it was like almost like a surreal experience to like see just like some characters that just popped out of my head now be on the stage, and they're like these young kids, and they're singing from their heart, and they have these radical ideas. Or even sometimes I have to catch my own boomerisms. I'm like, whoa, hold on, let me unpack, let me listen to the youth. And it was just it's been beautiful. I again, like Nate was saying before, like it's just wild to just see like alternate universes of this world just exist and go and fly and have so much hope and sparkle in their heart. And I'm just like, keep going. I'm trying to think of like another moment, but actually I want to keep that person's privacy, so I'll move on from that. But yeah, it's been beautiful, and now it's like I gotta do it again. Like that's the scary part. Like this is my first book. A lot of y'all here are like very accomplished, and now I'm like, whoa, that took a lot. Oh, you gotta do this. You gotta keep doing this. You gotta go back to making zines. Like, whoa.
Well, you can do both, I guess, right? They're both have. So I'm being told we got to wrap up right now. I can't say thank you enough to all of you. Please check out everybody's books. Check out their handles on here. Thank you, everybody. And remember, you can order the books at the link below. If you're in New York this week, join us for the citywide bookends and our in-person Children's Day Festival. And that's going to be the 28th and 29th of September in downtown Brooklyn. Thank you so much to our guests, and everybody enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Take care, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Peace.